Deep in the heart of the Green Valley, there lived a man named Zale. He was a kind man with hands that knew how to heal the earth. His wife, Elena, was the light of his life. Her laughter was like the sound of silver bells, and her heart was as pure as a mountain stream. They lived in a small cottage surrounded by flowers that Elena had planted herself. But one day, a dark cloud fell over their home. Elena became very sick, and no medicine could save her. On a cold, quiet night, she took her last breath, leaving Zale all alone in a world that suddenly felt gray and empty. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Zale could not stop crying. He felt as though his heart had been torn out of his chest. He did not want to bury Elena in the cold ground of the village cemetery. Instead, he wanted to keep her close. Every day for 7 days, he sat by her favorite spot in the garden and wept. He caught his tears in a small clay pot. When the pot was full, he buried it deep under the soil where Elena used to sit. He whispered a promise to the earth that he would never love another. The village of Green Valley was a place where people shared everything. They shared their food, their stories, and their secrets. But Zale became a shadow. He no longer went to the market to sell his vegetables. He no longer spoke to the neighbors who knocked on his door with warm bread and sympathy. He spent all his hours in the garden, staring at the spot where he had buried the pot of tears. The villagers started to whisper. They said that Zale was losing his mind. They said that grief had turned his blood into vinegar. But Zale did not care what they said. He only cared about the memory of Elena. He remembered the way she would tuck a jasmine flower behind her ear. He remembered how she sang to the birds in the morning. To him, the garden was the only place where she still lived. He began to talk to the soil. He told the ground about his day. He told the buried pot of tears about how much he missed her. He did not notice that the seasons were changing. The summer sun turned into the golden leaves of autumn, and the cold winds of winter began to blow. Zale stayed in his garden, wrapped in an old cloak, watching the spot in the earth. He was waiting for something, though he did not know what it was. He just felt that his sorrow was too big to simply disappear into the wind. 10 years passed by like a slow-moving river. In those 10 years, Zale grew old. His hair turned as white as the snow on the peaks of the mountains. His back was bent like a bow, and his hands were rough and wrinkled. He still lived in the same small cottage, but the garden had grown wild and overgrown. The flowers Elena had planted were mostly gone, replaced by tall weeds and thick thorns. Only the spot where the pot of tears was buried remained clear. Zale pulled the weeds from that spot every single day. He treated that patch of dirt like it was a holy place. The villagers had almost forgotten about the man who lived on the hill. Only the children sometimes climbed up to peek through the fence. They called him the ghost gardener. They were afraid of his silence and his sad eyes. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the valley, Zale noticed something different. A tiny green shoot had poked its way through the hard earth. It was a strange-looking plant, with leaves that looked like silver teardrops. Zale knelt down on his shaky knees. He felt a sudden jolt of electricity in his heart. He knew, without a doubt, that this was no ordinary weed. This was the fruit of his sorrow. He brought water and poured it gently around the shoot. He felt a strange peace he hadn't felt in a decade. The tiny shoot grew with a speed that was impossible. By the end of the first week, it was as tall as Zale's waist. By the end of the month, it was a thick sapling. The wood of the tree was not brown like other trees. It was a shimmering gray, almost like the color of a rainy sky. The leaves did not rustle in the wind, they made a soft, humming sound, like a woman humming a lullaby to a sleeping child. Zale spent every night sleeping on the ground next to the tree. He felt a warmth coming from the bark. He began to tell the tree the secrets he had kept for 10 years. He told the tree about his loneliness and his regrets. He told the tree that he had kept his promise and had never looked at another woman. The more he talked, the faster the tree grew. Its branches spread out like reaching arms, providing a canopy of silver over the garden. The thorns that had filled the yard began to wither and die, as if the tree was reclaiming the land for itself. The villagers noticed the strange silver glow coming from the hill at night. They began to wonder if Zale was practicing some kind of strange magic. They did not know that the tree was drinking the memories of a man who could not let go of the past. One afternoon, a heavy rain began to fall. Zale sat under the silver tree, protected from the water by its thick leaves. As the thunder rolled across the valley, the bark of the tree began to shift and move. It looked like wax melting in the sun. Zale watched with wide eyes as a shape began to form in the center of the trunk. At first, it was just a bump, but then it smoothed out into the shape of a forehead. Then came the curve of a nose and the outline of a jaw. Zale stopped breathing. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the wood. It felt soft and warm, like human skin. By the time the rain stopped, the face was fully formed. It was Elena. It was not just a carving, it was her. Her eyes were closed as if she were in a deep sleep. Every detail was perfect, from the small mole on her cheek to the way her hair curled around her ears. The tree had grown the face of his late wife. Zale fell to his feet and sobered. He cried out her name, but the wooden face did not move. It remained still and silent, a beautiful and terrifying miracle. He felt a mix of joy and horror. Was this a gift from the gods, or was it a curse meant to keep him trapped in his sadness forever? Word of the miracle tree spread through the green valley like a wildfire. It started with a young boy who had climbed the fence to find a lost ball. He saw the face in the tree and ran back to the village screaming about a ghost. Soon, a crowd had gathered at Zale's gate. They wanted to see the woman made of wood. Zale tried to keep them out. He yelled at them to go away, but the curiosity of the villagers was too strong. They pushed past the old gate and stood in the garden, gasping in wonder. The village elder, a man named Silas, stepped forward. He looked at the face of Alina and crossed himself. He told Zale that this was not natural. He said that dead things should stay dead and that the tree was a sign of a restless spirit. The people began to whisper that the tree was evil. Some said it was a demon taking Alina's form to trick Zale. Others thought it was a sign of great luck. Zale stood in front of the tree with a wooden staff, defending it. He told them all that it was his wife and they had no right to look at her. He chased them out and locked the gate with a heavy chain. But the peace of the garden was broken. The world now knew about the Tree of Tears. That night, the moon was full and bright. Zale sat at the base of the tree, looking up at Alina's wooden face. Suddenly, the eyes of the tree popped open. They were not made of wood, they were bright, glowing amber. The mouth of the tree moved, and a voice like the rustling of dry leaves filled the garden. Zale, the tree whispered. Zale jumped back, his heart hammering in his chest. Alina? Is it you? He asked. The tree did not answer directly. It only said, I am the fruit of your tears. I am the weight of your heart. Zale began to laugh and cry at the same time. He thought his wife had returned to him. He started to bring the tree gifts. He brought her the finest silk ribbons and tied them to the branches. He brought her bowls of fresh milk and honey, pouring them over the roots. He stayed awake for days, talking to the face, hoping she would say more. But the tree was greedy. It did not just want milk and honey. It started to demand more from Zale. It told him that in order for her to keep her eyes open, he had to give her his strength. Zale did not hesitate. He gave everything he had to the tree. He stopped eating so he could buy more gifts for the roots. He grew thinner and weaker, but he was happy. The tree began to change. It was no longer just a face in the trunk. The branches started to look like long, thin fingers. The roots began to move above the ground like snakes. The amber eyes of the tree grew brighter, and they followed Zale wherever he moved in the garden. The humming sound became louder, and it was no longer a lullaby. It sounded like 1,000 bees trapped in a box. The villagers became more afraid. They could hear the sound from the bottom of the hill. They noticed that the birds no longer flew over Zale's house. The cats in the village would hiss and run away if they smelled the wind blowing from the hill. The elder, Silas, called a meeting in the village square. He told the people that the silver tree was draining the life from the valley. The crops in the nearby fields were starting to turn gray and brittle. The water in the well was tasting like salt, like human tears. Silas said they had to destroy the tree before it destroyed them all. He asked for volunteers to go up the hill with axes and fire. But the people were terrified of the face tree. They were afraid that if they hurt the tree, the spirit of Alina would haunt them until the end of time. They waited, hoping Zale would wake up from his spell. Zale was now so weak he could hardly stand. He crawled to the tree every morning. The face of Alina looked more alive than ever. Her skin, the wood, looked soft and pink. She looked young and beautiful, while Zale looked like a walking skeleton. One night, the tree spoke again. "Zale, I am cold," she whispered. Zale looked around his empty house. He had already sold his bed and his chairs to buy offerings for the tree. He took his last blanket and wrapped it around the trunk. "Is that better, my love?" he asked. The tree shook its branches. "No. I need the warmth of a heart," it replied. Zale did not understand. He thought she wanted him to hug her. He climbed into the roots and pressed his chest against the bark. He felt a sharp sting. The bark had grown small thorns that pricked his skin. They began to drink his blood. Zale felt dizzy, but he did not pull away. He felt that he was finally becoming one with his wife. He felt her heart beat through the wood. It was slow and heavy. He closed his eyes and drifted into a dream. In the dream, Alina was walking through a field of fire. She was calling for him, but she wasn't smiling. She was screaming in pain, telling him to let her go. Zale woke up at dawn. His shirt was stained with red, and he felt as though he had run a marathon. He looked up at the face in the tree. The face had changed. It no longer looked like the kind Alina he remembered. The eyes were slanted and angry. The mouth was pulled back in a sneer. He realized with a shock that the tree was not his wife. It was a monster fed by his grief. He tried to stand up, but his legs felt like lead. He looked at the garden and saw that all the life was gone. Even the grass had turned to ash. He looked toward the village and saw that the trees in the valley were also turning gray. The silver tree was a parasite. It was reaching out its roots underground, stealing the life from everything it touched. Zale felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had brought this plague to his home because he was too selfish to let his wife rest in peace. He had buried his tears, but he had also buried his common sense. He knew he had to stop the tree, but he had no strength left. He looked at the face of the monster and saw a single tear of amber resin fall from its eye. It was mocking him. In the village, the situation was becoming desperate. The village well had completely dried up, leaving only a thick, salty sludge at the bottom. The children were falling ill with a strange cough that sounded like rustling leaves. Silas knew he could wait no longer. He took a heavy iron axe from his shed and sharpened it until it could cut a hair in the wind. He gathered 5 of the strongest men in the village. "We go now," he said. "We do not listen to Zale, and we do not look at the face. We only strike the wood." The men marched up the hill, their faces grim. When they reached Zale's gate, they found it was already open. The silver tree had grown so large that its roots had smashed the fence to pieces. The garden was a wasteland of grey dust. Zale was lying at the foot of the tree, barely breathing. The silver tree sensed the men's arrival. Its branches began to lash out like whips. The humming sound turned into a deafening roar. Silas stepped forward, raising his axe. "In the name of the living, I command this evil to fall," he shouted. He swung the axe with all his might, but when the blade hit the silver bark, it bounced off as if it had hit solid rock. The men tried to help Silas, but the tree was too fast. The root snakes rose from the ground and wrapped around their ankles, pulling them down. The silver leaves flew from the branches like tiny throwing knives, cutting their skin. The men screamed and scrambled back toward the gate. Only Silas remained, holding his axe and shielding his eyes. The face in the tree began to laugh. It was a cold, hollow sound that made the men's bones ache. "You cannot kill what you have fed," the tree roared. Zale watched from the ground, his eyes filled with tears. He saw Silas struggling and knew that the village was doomed if he didn't do something. He realized that the axe could not cut the tree because the tree was protected by his own love and sorrow. It was his magic that had created it, and only he could undo it. He crawled toward Silas, grabbing the man's boot. "Stop!" Zale croaked. "You can't win with anger. It lives on pain." Silas looked down at the broken old man. "Then what do we do, Zale?" "It's eating the world." Zale looked up at the face of the woman he had loved. He realized that the real Alina was gone, and this thing was just a cage for her memory. Zale told Silas to gather the men and leave. "I started this. I must finish it," he said. Silas saw the determination in Zale's eyes and nodded. He led the wounded men back down the hill. Once they were gone, the tree became quiet. The branches stopped lashing, and the roar faded back into a hum. The face looked down at Zale with a look of false pity. "They are gone, Zale. Now it is just us again," the tree said softly. Zale stood up, using the trunk for support. He looked into the amber eyes. "You are not Alina," he said firmly. The tree hissed. "I have her face. I have her voice. I have the tears you gave me. I am whatever you want me to be." Zale shook his head. "No. Alina would never hurt the children. She would never steal the water from the earth. You are a ghost made of salt and regret." As he spoke these words, a crack appeared on the forehead of the wooden face. The tree screamed in pain. Zale realized that the truth was the only weapon that worked. He began to speak about all the things he had ignored. He spoke about how he had let his house fall apart. He spoke about how he had forgotten the smell of real flowers because he was too busy smelling the silver tree's rot. The cracks began to spread down the face and into the trunk. The silver bark started to turn back into ordinary brown wood. The amber eyes dimmed. I loved her, Zale shouted at the tree. But love is not a pot of tears buried in the dirt. Love is letting go when the time comes. With every word of truth, the tree shivered and groaned. The silver leaves began to turn brown and fall to the ground. The hum became a whimper. But the tree was not finished. It reached out a branch and grabbed Zale's throat. It began to squeeze. If I die, you die with me, the monster shrieked. Zale could not breathe. He felt the world turning black. In his mind, he saw a vision of the real Alina. She was standing in a bright light, smiling at him. She wasn't made of wood or silver. She was made of sunshine and peace. She held out her hand and whispered, "Forgive yourself, Zale." Zale felt a surge of warmth in his chest. He reached into his pocket and found a small, dried jasmine flower he had kept for 10 years. It was the last thing Alina had ever given him. He pressed the flower into the crack in the tree's heart. The jasmine flower began to glow with a pure white light. The light spread through the cracks of the silver tree like water through parched earth. The tree let go of Zale's throat and began to dissolve. It didn't fall over like a normal tree, it crumbled into fine white sand. The face of the monster melted away, leaving only the faint scent of jasmine in the air. Zale fell to the ground, gasping for air. He watched as the giant silver canopy vanished into the wind. When the dust settled, the garden was empty. The hill was silent. The gray color began to fade from the grass, and the thorns turned into soft green vines. Zale looked down at the spot where the pot of tears had been buried. The earth had opened up, and the clay pot was sitting on the surface, broken into 1,000 pieces. The tears were gone, evaporated into the sky. Zale felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had carried for a decade. He felt light. He felt old, yes, but he also felt free. He looked toward the village and saw the people coming out of their houses. The sun was shining on the valley once again. Zale did not stay on the hill. He knew that the cottage held too many ghosts. He walked down the hill for the first time in 10 years. He walked with a steady pace, even though his body was tired. When he reached the village square, the people stopped and stared. They saw a man who had returned from the dead. Silas walked up to him and took his hand. "Is it over?" the elder asked. Zale nodded. "It is over. The tree is gone, and so is my sorrow." The villagers cheered. They brought Zale food and clean clothes. They invited him into their homes. But Zale had one more thing to do. He went to the village cemetery, the place he had avoided for so long. He found the spot where Alina's name was carved on a simple stone. He sat down and talked to her, but this time, he didn't cry. He told her about the world. He told her about the silver tree and how sorry he was for holding on so tight. He felt a soft breeze brush against his cheek, like a kiss. He knew she was finally at peace, and so was he. The following spring, the Green Valley was more beautiful than it had ever been. The crops grew tall and strong, and the water in the well was as sweet as nectar. Zale moved into a small room in the village and started to work as a gardener for the community. He taught the children how to plant seeds and how to care for the earth. He told them stories, but he never told them the story of the silver tree. He wanted that memory to fade away. However, something strange began to happen on the hill where the cottage once stood. A new tree began to grow. It was not silver, and it had no face. It was a simple, beautiful apple tree. Its bark was a healthy brown, and its leaves were a vibrant green. When the tree bloomed, the flowers were white and smelled like jasmine. The villagers said that the tree grew from the place where Zale had finally found forgiveness. They called it the Tree of Peace. As the years went by, Zale became the wisest man in the village. People came from far away to ask for his advice on love and loss. He always told them the same thing: do not build a house out of your tears. Use them to water the garden of your future. He lived a long life, and when his time finally came to join Elena, he died with a smile on his face. He was buried next to her under the soft grass of the cemetery. The village never forgot the lesson of the man who buried his tears. They learned that grief is a natural thing, like the rain, but if you try to trap it, it becomes a flood that can drown everything you love. The hill remained a place of beauty, and the apple tree provided fruit for generations of children. The silver tree was gone forever, but the story lived on as a warning and a hope. One day, a young girl named Maya was playing near the old hill. She found a small, shimmering gray stone in the dirt. It looked like a piece of silver bark, but it was hard and cold. She picked it up and showed it to her grandfather. The old man's face turned pale. He recognized the stone from the stories his own father had told him. He took the stone and threw it deep into the river. Some things are better left at the bottom of the water, he told the girl. Maya was curious. But it was so pretty, Grandpa, she said. The grandfather sat her down and told her that beauty can sometimes hide a great hunger. He told her that long ago, a man's sadness had almost eaten the world. Maya listened with wide eyes. She looked up at the hill and saw the apple tree waving its branches in the wind. She understood that the hill was a place of balance. It held the memory of a great darkness and the reality of a great light. The story of Zale and the Tree of Tears became a folktale told every year at the harvest festival. The parents would tell their children about the importance of being grateful for what they have and brave enough to say goodbye to what they lose. They would light candles and place them around the apple tree on the hill. The light from the candles would reflect in the leaves, making the tree look like it was covered in stars. It was a beautiful sight, a reminder that even the deepest sorrow can be turned into something that brings people together. The Green Valley remained a place of peace for many centuries. The memory of the silver tree faded into a legend, a story that people weren't sure was entirely true. But every now and then, someone would find a jasmine flower blooming in the middle of winter, and they would remember the name of Zale and the wife he loved too much. But stories have a way of coming back when they are needed. Many years later, a young man in a neighboring village lost his brother. He was so consumed by his anger and his sadness that he locked himself away, just as Zale had done. He heard the story of the Tree of Tears and decided he wanted to find the hill. He thought that if he could find a piece of the silver wood, he could bring his brother back. He traveled for days until he reached the green valley. He saw the apple tree on the hill and began to dig at its roots. He was looking for the broken pot. He was looking for the magic of the tears. But no matter how deep he dug, he found nothing but rich, brown soil and healthy roots. He sat down and cried, feeling defeated. As he sat there, an old woman walked up the hill. She was a descendant of Silas, the elder. She saw the young man digging and shook her head. "You are looking for the wrong thing," she said gently. The young man looked up, his eyes red from weeping. "I want to see my brother again. I heard there was a tree here that could show the faces of the dead." The old woman sat down next to him. That tree was not a gift. It was a prison. It didn't bring Alina back, it only stole the life of the man who loved her. Do you want to be a prisoner of your own heart? The young man looked at the holes he had dug. He looked at the beautiful apple tree he had nearly damaged. He realized that his brother would not want him to be miserable. The old woman gave the young man an apple from the tree. "Eat this," she said. "It tastes of peace." The young man took a bite. The fruit was sweet and crisp, and it filled him with a strange sense of calm. He realized that the only way to honor his brother was to live a life that his brother would be proud of. He stood up and helped the old woman fill the holes he had dug. He apologized for his actions and promised to go back home and help his family. The old woman smiled. "The magic of this hill is not in the silver wood. It is in the choice to keep walking." The young man left the valley that evening, carrying the memory of the apple tree in his heart. He did not bring his brother back, but he brought back the strength to endure the loss. The hill stood as a silent witness to the passing of time. The cottage eventually crumbled into the earth, and the apple tree grew old and sturdy. The lesson of Zale was passed from heart to heart, like a torch in the dark. People learned that while you can bury many things in the garden, you should never bury your joy along with your grief. They learned that the faces we love are not found in the wood of a tree or the salt of a tear, but in the kindness we show to others and the memories we keep in our hearts. The Green Valley continued to flourish, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the beauty of moving on. The silver tree was a ghost of the past, but the apple tree was the promise of the future. And so, the tale of the man who buried his tears comes to an end. It is a story that reminds us that our emotions are like the wind, they must be allowed to blow through us. If we try to trap them, they become a storm. But if we let them go, they become the breeze that carries the scent of jasmine and the song of the birds. Zale and Alina are long gone, but their story remains, a candle lighting the path for anyone who finds themselves lost in the shadows of sorrow. The story you have just heard is a beautiful African tale I heard long ago. I am telling you to wake your minds to the truth that holding on to grief too tightly can destroy the beauty of the present. If you were the protagonist, what would you do if you were in Zale's shoes? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else.